First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
We believe every believer a disciple, every disciple a disciple maker, every disciple maker's home a potential church, and every church a church planting center. It's like, okay, let's get busy.
The founder of the Timothy Initiative is our guest now on First Person. Welcome to this week's interview. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and coming up you'll meet David Nelms. What is the Timothy Initiative, or TTI, and what does it do? We'll find out next. First Person is here every week at this time with interviews of people from all walks of life who are making a difference for God by following His call in their life. You can explore past programs at firstpersoninterview.com or subscribe to our podcast with almost any podcast app. Just search for First Person with Wayne Shepherd. I also invite you to our social media page at facebook.com/firstpersoninterview, where you'll see the upcoming schedule and more. That's facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. 2 Timothy 2:2 says, "And the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others." And that's the basis of this global organization. To explain further, here's the founder, Pastor David Nelms.
Yeah, the Timothy Initiative, or TTI, we are attempting to plant churches in places where there are few to no churches. Think your unreached people groups of the world, basically your Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, animist parts of the world. We have been able to plant churches among a little over 1,700 different unreached people group ethnicities. Not 1,700 churches, but 1,700 different people groups that are missiologically, if that's a word, classified as a UPG.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get the backstory on this. I know that you're the founder of TTI, and I want to find out, how did this first come to your heart? How did the Lord move? What were the circumstances, and when was that?
Yeah, Wayne, I was on a trip to an Asian country. I was walking through a village, and I noticed several small mosques and a couple of Hindu temples, and I asked the gentleman I was with, I said, "Where's the church?" And he said, Dr. David, there's no church here. And I'd already been in many places where there was no known Christians, no church, where they'd never heard the name Jesus. But there was something about that day, it just crushed my heart. I noticed out in the distance, I could see the young men working in a rice paddy, just back-breaking work under that hot sun. And if they don't work, they don't feed their families. And the wives were taking care of the little babies, and the old women were cooking over a fire. The old men were sitting under a tree debating something. Little children were running around playing. Some of them were naked. Their toys were like sticks. And it just hit me. These people, they're all Hindus or Muslims. And it just struck me. They're not rejecting Jesus. They don't know who He is. And they don't know who He is because nobody's ever told them. And I'm pastoring a nice-sized church at the time, several thousand members. And we had plenty of resources. And I just felt like God saying, "I want you to do something." So all I knew how to do was start churches. So I went home and got my elders together. I said, "I'd like to start some churches." And we set a goal to start over the next 3 years, 7,000 little house fellowships. And it was only intended to be a 3-year local church missionary project.
I got to stop you there. How does a single church foster 7,000 house churches? That's a bold vision.
Well, yes, it was. We removed from the church planting equation what I usually refer to as the 3 S's, which are salaries, sanctuaries, seminaries. Mm-hmm. Those things are not bad by any means. You just don't have to have them to lead someone to Christ and disciple them. And so we took out salaries by training tent makers, like the Apostle Paul. Sanctuaries, we'd use a house under a tree, cave, wherever we could find to meet. Seminary, I'm very pro-seminary, but I've always believed the local church should be the primary place to equip people to do the work of the ministry, Ephesians 4, 11, 12. And I would say if the work of the ministry is anything, it's the Great Commission, the ministry of reconciliation, 2 Corinthians 5. And so I think I, like many pastors, had been guilty of training over the years. I trained more people to make coffee and donuts than I had to make disciple makers. So when you take those three out, you really lower the cost of church planting. And so it becomes easier to plant more churches.
Was it a hard sell for your elders?
No, it was a great church, and they had a real heart for the world. I think the number may have been a little bit like, okay, let's humor him. He wants to do it. So, but the idea was certainly they were all for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're in ministry, and I have to assume you're in a comfortable ministry, and the church was growing. I mean, you said that several thousand members, and yet you responded to God's call to do this when you didn't really need it in your life, did you?
No, I didn't. But I've always had when I made the decision to serve the Lord, what we used to call full-time service, when I was 12 years old. And at the time, Wayne, I thought God wanted me to be a missionary. And I tell everybody I missed my calling. I ended up being a pastor for 37 years, but I always had a heart for, it's always bothered me that 2,000 years after Jesus said, tell everybody, there are literally billions who've never heard a clear presentation of the gospel. And I don't know how many millions that haven't even heard his name. And we've got the manpower, we've got the technology, we certainly have the money, and we've got the Holy Spirit, same Holy Spirit first century had, and we've got his commission. We call him our Lord. There is no reason for us not to cross that finish line. It's always bothered me. I've got two brothers that started missionary organizations, and so it's. I think we're going to answer for it one day.
Yeah, you couldn't say no, could you?
No.
You cite 2 Timothy 2:2 as sort of the benchmark, the foundation of your ministry, and the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust a reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. So draw that out for me a bit, if you would.
Yeah, I think 2 Timothy 2:2 is maybe the most, for me at least, from my perspective, the most important discipling verse in the Bible. And in that verse, you see multiplication. There's 4 generations there. There's Paul, Timothy, faithful people, others also. And if you connect that with Matthew 28, 19 and 20, where Jesus, the Great Commission was given in the first gospel there, it makes sense because Jesus said, go make disciples. In verse 19, the next verse, he said, teach them, those new disciples, to observe, obey everything I've commanded you. He just commanded them to make disciples. So I think what he was really saying was make disciples and teach them to do the same. So we would say the Great Commission is not making disciples, but make disciples who make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Mm-hmm. And that's what 2 Timothy 2:2 is saying. And so we believe that I often challenge pastors on a Sunday, ask your people to write somewhere their definition of what is a disciple. And I will usually say I'll be shocked if anybody includes in their definition the idea of multiplication. You're going to hear words like growing strong, maturity, teaching. I don't know that. See, we would say a disciple is someone who lives like Jesus and leads others to do the same. Mm-hmm. Living like Jesus to us is the great commandment. Jesus loved his Father. He loved people. Leading others to do the same is the Great Commission. Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. And so we believe a disciple of Christ is someone who's following that great commandment and the Great Commission. And if I can even be more specific, I think if you're following the Great Commandment consistently, the Great Commission will just naturally flow out of it. I don't know how you can love God with all your heart and love your neighbor and not want to tell your neighbor about the God who died to redeem them.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
Well, how did the Timothy Initiative grow from a single church to, I don't know, the partnerships you have today literally go around the world, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. God is it's just a God thing. Again, originally we were only intending to work at it for 3 years. It was just our church funding it. We had people overseas, nationals at a network they were the frontline soldiers doing all the work. But I began to see that the thing was growing, and the tail was beginning to wag the dog, if you would. And so we separated the TTI from the church, and it became its own entity, and began looking for partners, other churches, individuals that would have a similar burden and passion, and it's just taken off.
So how many participants do you think you have now?
It would be in the thousands. I know we're training. I just got the numbers 2 weeks ago. In 2026, that's just a couple of months out, we'll be training 210,000 Timothys in, I think it's 46, 47 different countries. And those Timothys will be trained by 12,000, what we call Pauls. A Paul is a local church pastor. So 12,000 churches where our national leaders are training the Pauls. The Pauls will recruit members that we call Timothys. And then the Timothys go out, lead people to Christ. And the Timothy, we call Titus. It's the next generation. To graduate, Timothy needs to raise up 2 Tituses, and the Tituses are also being trained. So you double 200,000 Timothys, you got a lot of Tituses.
That's great.
And so it's really multiplication is built into the system, Wayne. Someone said, and we kind of grabbed it as our little mantra, for lack of a better word, we believe every believer a disciple, every disciple a disciple maker, every disciple maker's home a potential church, and every church a church planting center. And when you lead a Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist to the Lord, and they have zero church baggage, and all they know is what you're showing them from the Bible, and you teach them that, it's like, okay, let's get busy. And so it just takes off.
We're learning about the Timothy Initiative, and there's more with Pastor David Nelms coming up in just a moment. Stay with us. Here's Ed Cannon on the vision for FEBC's weekly podcast.
The primary purpose of Until All Have Heard, of course, is to share the experience that FEBC has because we have staff on the ground in so many oppressive places. But in addition to that, we're trying to speak to you in a way that only the kind of testimonies you'll hear from around the globe can do.
Discover how the gospel is making a difference around the world. Search for Until All Have Heard on your favorite podcast platform, or hear it online at febc.org. My guest is Dr. David Nelms. David is the founder of the Timothy Initiative, TTI. But you're no longer day-to-day leadership, are you? Your son is president?
Yeah, Jared is the brains of the operation. Everybody tells me I'm just the pretty face. Okay. So Jared was in Asia from the get-go, from the very beginning, and developed our system, developed the curriculum, trained most of our early leaders, whereas I was basically a glorified fundraiser. And so at some point it just became obvious he was the brains of the operation. And so nothing changed. I kept doing what I've been doing all along. He kept doing what he's been doing all along. He just got the title, but he earned it, believe me.
So you're still pastoring?
No, I stepped down about 10 years ago.
Okay.
12 years ago, actually.
Okay. What is this I hear about mapping the world? Talk about that.
Yeah. Years ago, Campus Crusade for Christ, had developed a software to map out where churches were and where they weren't. And they got it down to a certain level. Crew has been an incredible partner with us. They've just been so generous. And Jared heard about the software and got permission. We raised some money and developed it down to where you can now show if there's a church in a trailer court, in a nursing home. And what we do is we send out our training centers are in local churches. The pastor, the Paul, has maybe 20 Timothys. He will send those Timothys out over the 2 years of training out to prayer walks, the 50 closest villages to their training center, which usually is going to be within a day's walk, maybe two. And as they prayer walk those villages, they ask questions. Are there churches here? Are there Christ followers here? And in the part of the world we work in, if there's a church there or a Christian there, everybody knows. It'd be like if someone opened up a mosque in your neighborhood this afternoon, the whole neighborhood would know by tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so they then come back and report back to the Paul what they found. And we have maps of the area. And if they found a church and Christ followers on the map we paint it green. If they found Christ followers but no church, we paint it yellow. If they couldn't find a church or a Christ follower, we paint it red. We then that training center begins to pray over that map. And it's an intentional thing. And we set a goal that 50% of the churches that are started by that training center will be in yellow and red villages. So we call it a 50-50 strategy. We survey 50 villages, and we want half the churches we start to be in the red and yellow. The ultimate goal is to paint the whole section, say county green, which eventually be the whole country green. And we call that ACHIEVE, which is an acronym for a church in every village everywhere. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to achieve with this strategy. And it's not just TTI. There are many, many, many other organizations. We've actually, together, we have formed what's called the Coalition of the Willing.
Okay.
So some of the
you're
largest.
Networking, yeah.
Yes, it's a kingdom effort. And what this does is, the beauty of it is, nobody has to stop being who they are. For example, we're not a sending agency. We don't send Western missionaries. We have local leaders who train local leaders. There are other organizations, though, ministries doing the same thing, but they send out missionaries. So they don't have to stop sending them out. We don't have to start. We can all do our own thing, but because we're communicating and sharing data, we're mapping together. Two's better than one. We're better together. And TTI realizes we will never cross the finish line of the Great Commission alone, nor do we want to. Okay? And the other ministries feel the same way. And so we have actually fully mapped several nations in the world. I'm talking about with tens of millions of people.
Give me an example.
And, for security sensitive, it'd be difficult to do so.
I understand.
But I can tell you one nation of over 30 million people, and 84% of the villages came out red. That is not a single...
No witness.
Yeah. And I can mention Togo. We have fully mapped Togo. Togo is a smaller country, West Africa. I think it has about 11,000 settlements, if you will. And I think it came out 6,000 of them were either red or yellow. Okay, so that's like over half the villages there. And by the way, we found a couple of thousand villages that the government did not even have listed as existing, and we're finding that everywhere. We're finding that everywhere. The population of this world is just exploding. People are migrating and moving. So, yeah, it's how will we know when we've got the gospel within earshot or within walking distance of every man, woman, boy, and girl? The map will tell us how we'll know.
No doubt you've been to some of these places. Tell me a story or two how God is using this.
It's incredible. I was just in a Southeast Asian country, and I met a guy. He's a Timothy now. They called him the Cage Man. He'd lived in a cage, like a cage, an iron cage you'd put a lion in or a tiger. He had lived in that cage, Wayne, for 16 years.
Oh, goodness. Wow.
He was demonized to the core. When they would let him out, he would become violent. He would hurt himself. He would hurt others. His family was just devastated. They were just broken. You can imagine having to put your son, your husband, in a cage. And he had lived that way for off and on for 16 years. And a Timothy heard about the cage man, and he came to the village, and he told him, he said, stick your hand through the bars. And the man did, and the Timothy took his hand with his hand. I suppose that's probably the only time in years anybody had tried to hold the man's hand. And as he held his hand, he told him the gospel, Wayne, and he told him about Jesus and the cross and the empty tomb. And he prayed over the man, and God saw fit to deliver him, set him free. The man on the spot became a follower of Christ. They let him out of the cage. It's just been a few months, and now he's in the training center. I was in his training center. I saw him. I watched as he just praying and lifting his hands and praising God. And he's out now telling others about Jesus. Sitting right behind him was a man, they called him, the first guy was the cage man. This was I'm just telling you what they called him, the crazy man. He lived out in the woods for 6 years. Kind of reminded me of the story in the Gospels of the demoniac of Gadara.
Mm-hmm.
Same type thing. Violent, mean, angry. He couldn't live. He didn't live in a house. He just everybody was afraid of him, and he was just insane. Same thing. Timothy found him, prayed over him. God set him free, saved him. He was sitting in the same training center with two grown men that were his Tituses, that he is now led to the Lord Jesus, and they're all being trained together.
Excellent.
That was like 1 hour of one day.
All right, I'm listening to this. I'm somewhere in America, and I belong to my church. I love my church. I love the Lord. I've followed him for many years. What's my role in this?
The first thing I would say is thank God for our good churches. And I don't know about you, but I feel like something's happening. And every church, I speak somewhere every Sunday, and the last 3 or 4 weeks, the churches have just been packed where I'm at. But there's 3 things we ask of people who are partners. Number 1, prayer, funding. And the third thing is we would say, do the same thing at home. Start making disciples at home. Before Jesus said ends of the earth, Acts 1:8, he said Jerusalem, Judea. And I've always believed mission begins at home. That's the pastor coming out of me. But start making disciples at home. And if you don't know how, talk to your pastor. He will help you.
My thanks to David Nelms for introducing us to the Timothy Initiative on today's First Person. We learned that TTI is a global movement that makes and multiplies disciples, churches, and leaders committed to getting a church in every village, everywhere. To find out more about it, please visit firstpersoninterview.com for links to TTI. And to listen again to what you've heard or share it with others, use that same page, firstpersoninterview.com. These weekly interviews are made possible by my friends at the Far East Broadcasting Company, who share the same goal of making disciples. FEBC broadcasts in more than 50 countries and has millions of listeners each day. To learn more about this organization, please visit febc.org. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for First Person.